Hi, friends. Welcome back. So, markets are freaking out today. Why? Federal Chair Jerome Powell says that he's in no hurry to cut rates. I want to go over this and other top stories in the markets, and let's just jump right in. So, this was the headline here: Fed is in no hurry to lower interest rates. And this is exactly what he said. He said, in considering additional adjustments to the target range for the Fed funds rate, right? We're talking about where to set rates. He says, we will carefully assess incoming data. So this is sort of why that we talk about multiple stories going on in the market, because this is the stuff that the Fed looks at is too. They're trying to figure out, okay, do we need to cut rates or not? Should we raise? Should we hold, etc. Federal Chair Jerome Powell also says we're looking also the evolving outlook and the balance of risks. And this is the key statement that everyone's talking about, what's freaking out the markets. He says the economy is not sending any signals that we need to be in a hurry to lower rates. I'll read again. This is exactly what he said. The economy is not sending any signals that we need to be in a hurry to lower rates. And so then essentially what we're doing now is, as we go through the news all the time, and say, okay, what's the healthy economy? What's the healthy consumers? How are people feeling? Are we shopping or not? That's basically what it boils down to. Because if you want to understand, the markets and the economy and the country, I guess you'd say, it's based on consumers, right? It's based on the money just keep on flowing. And what's interesting about these things and sort of has me concerned, and I always find it strange, is I see unemployment is going up, right? I see people are losing their jobs. So for example, just today, this is GM. It says GM cuts 1,000 more jobs as EV push continues. And I'll see this from various companies, around the market. And I always ask the same question to you guys, like, how are you feeling in your sector? Are you guys hiring? Are you guys firing? Are you just holding pat? And people say different things. That's why we have a community, just to share, info. But when I see something like this, and let's say, for example, you have mass layoffs in various industries or various cities, I'm like, okay, so why are people still shopping? Now, there's be a couple of reasons, and this is sort of why I ask you. If someone, say, loses their job, do they feel confident that they can find another with no problem, right? Well, first, I'd say if you lose your job, I would just say cut back on your spending. I think that's pretty reasonable advice. But to be fair, let's say you got 10 interviews and you're not worried, and okay, fine, right? But this sort of have a disconnect, in my opinion. The other issue is too is like, well, maybe people just don't want to tell kids that Santa ain't coming, right? You just sort of have this culture in USA that keeps people shopping, and they just throw it on their credit cards and try to, live this crazy facade that everything's fine. And you certainly do have people living that lifestyle. You could argue that are many people in the USA, but it does keep the system flowing. And so, and then there's another issue where maybe there's just no problem at all, right? But it depends who you ask. So my understanding is the people towards the bottom of the economic scale are really struggling right now in the USA, and then there's people towards the top who are actually doing okay. So that sort of fudges the numbers a bit, right? So if people at the top are spending yet more, it sort of covers up that people at the bottom are really struggling. So there's that. And then I also see headlines here, and I'm just telling you guys what's going on in the market. There's a meeting. It's called the APEC, APEC. The headline, I'll say the headline. It says, headline here is hopes and fears about AI's workforce impact. So that's essentially what everyone's talking about, right? Is what's going to happen when AI becomes, rolled out to all of the industries, various companies. People become more efficient. You just won't need as many workers, and more people will lose their job. And so you have all these things put together, and then you may have the risk of inflation creeping up with Trump's policies. Now, Federal Chair Jerome Powell can't say that directly. It's like, he just don't get involved in politics, right? He can say, hey, because I asked him, hey, if Trump wants to fire you, what will you do? And Federal, Chair Jerome Powell just said, it's not permitted under law. That was his quote from the last time they asked him. But this is sort of what's going on in the markets, right? People are trying to gauge, okay, what's the cost of borrowing money, and is it going to be cheaper or not? So according to Powell, it's not going to be cheaper. The last time I checked before, it was like markets were pricing in December an 85% chance of a 25 basis point cut, right? So high chance of cut for December was before. I just checked today. Markets are now saying 62% chance of a cut in December. So it's getting closer to 50-50, where it's a toss up. And again, it's you could argue it's fears of coming inflationary policies under Trump. You can make the case that maybe the economy isn't as weak as people say, right? Even though unemployment's ticking up, people are out still shopping. And that's sort of why I like to talk with you guys about, like, hey, how are you feeling in your neck of the woods? I can tell you here in Busan, we don't buy anything. Well, this is in general. Just don't buy anything unless it's on sale, right? That's just my opinion. I think there's no reason to, and if you can get something for cheaper by waiting a couple months, then do it. Now, certainly there are situations to where maybe nothing ever goes on sale, and then you just pay the price of what it is, right? And this is sort of what I like to ask you guys, like, do you have the luxury of doing that? Can you buy things when they're on sale, or does nothing ever go on sale? Now, when you talk about this kind of stuff, then is a reflection of demand, meaning that, right? Let's say, for example, I sell, we'll use example cars, and Tesla is easy to talk about. And Tesla wants to sell you a car, we'll just say for $40,000, right? And they make these cars, they want to sell you for 40, and no one buys. And they just keep piling up on the lots, and you got to put them in airport lots, and then you got to put them in for real, like Dollar Tree lots or whatever. And then what Tesla decides to do is cut the prices. Okay. So you cut the prices, and then you see, okay, can we spur demand? And so this is sort of why I ask you guys, are there sales? Because that means they would have a demand problem. Here's another thing that you could argue too is, okay, so what are rates at? So for example, I think the prediction right now is mortgage rates are heading back up to 7%. It says mortgage rates jumped. Oh, it's right at 7%. Mortgage rates jumped to 7%. And so I've been hearing around the market that people are kind of waiting for mortgage to hit 5%, and then they're more interested in buying a place, right? But when it goes to the 7%, that slows down everything. Or you could argue, say, with car loan, if you're not paying for cash, which I think you should, pay cash for cars. Don't, get a loan that's going to cost you money to buy something that's going to go down in value. But I get it, guys. I really get it. Most Americans don't listen to me, of course. They're going to go get a loan to go buy a car, and you're going to lose money twice: once on the loan, second on the car. But the point being, though, is that interest rates do affect, people's sort of willingness, and it affects demand. One thing that companies do, and we used again Tesla as an example, they'll actually give you 0% financing, so they're going to take a loss essentially. They're going to eat up the interest rate for you to get you to buy cars, and that essentially signals demand problem for me. And then this goes back to when Federal Chair Jerome Powell says, okay, we're looking around, do we need to cut rates or not? That's the balance that they have to face, is essentially if they cut rates, yes, it'll get consumer shopping, maybe also not just shopping, but also maybe encourage companies to hire more, right? You're going to borrow more money, hire more people, get the growth going. But in turn, though, you're always worried about inflation, right? If essentially you give too much economic activity, you're running too hot, you have inflation too quickly, and then you have Trump coming in that may have inflationary policies. So he can't comment directly on that. But according to Powell, they're in no hurry to cut rates. Theoretically, they could even talk about raising, perhaps, but I don't think they're gonna do that. But theoretically, they could. If it were me, just hold. And I've been saying that for a long time. I think that big cut in the beginning they did before was like the 50 basis one, was that a couple months ago, was probably a bit premature. That's just my opinion. But we'll see what they do in December. And again, it's about 62% chance that they're going to cut. Another thing I want to bring up, this was a really odd one to me. The banks, they're calling this thing SRT. It's significant rate transfer. And I want to show you guys what I'm looking at. And you can see here, it says here, a flood of money chases U.S. banking's hottest new trade. So what the banks are doing is they're passing on risks to other people. And honestly, when I read through the stuff and it becomes really convoluted, it sounds a lot like the '08 crisis thing, but they're going to argue it's not. So first, let me read through it, and then I'll get your opinion. So again, SRT stands for significant, significant risk transfer. And when banks try to repackage a bunch of debt essentially and sell it off to other people, and they're trying to spread out their risk and take it away from them and spread on you, and then they'll give you a return if you're willing to take that risk. So it says, one, banks lend money. So you have the loan and the capital here, and it says loans are considered risk to the bank. So by law, they have to hold capital and reserve in case they don't get paid back. And actually, the Federal Reserve also sets the rates on how much money they have to hold in reserve. There were fights about that. Actually, the Fed wanted banks to hold more capital, more money on reserve. But the bank lobbyists won, and they can hold less. And if you don't understand what this means to our banking system and our economy as a whole, the more money that they can lend out, right, the more money that the banks can theoretically make as long as people pay it back. But it allows them to award more loans and get more money out in the system. And so the reserve levels are actually a really important number that we don't talk enough about. But I'll just say that the Fed is involved with this kind of stuff. So anyway, so the bank's got this new, thing they can sell to people. The SRTs they're calling it. And it says here, two, to reduce the required capital reserves, the bank bundles and transfers some of the risk to investors. And it says up to 50% of losses for 5 to 7 years, typically. And then we have this number three. In return for agreeing to cover possible losses, investors get a periodic payment for a duration of the SRT, right? So you can see here, and this is how the game is played. If you're going to shoulder more risk, we're willing to pay you a premium for that. And again, these are these new products that they're trying to push. And then it says number four, the SRT matures. That's again significant risk transfer. If the loans have performed well, investors recoup the money they put up at the start. And then another, if borrowers have defaulted, meaning people don't have any money, they can't pay you back, investors can lose as much as 100% of their stake. The bank observes the rest of the losses. So again, this is a way for banks to spread out risk. Whenever I read this kind of stuff, I always just think, oh wait, I lived through this stuff. Whenever you're figuring out these crazy ways to repackage debt and sell it to other people, but it all rests on assuming that people are able to pay you back. And if you don't, then you have this domino effect. And the argument that banks would make is that, hey, it's not just us who are going to, fail. We're spreading the risk among other people. And then I think to myself, well, before, if you're just worried about banks, now you're worried about everybody failing. But we'll see. The other thing too I want to mention is, here in Busan, and I just wanted to point this stuff out to you guys because sometimes people ask me about Busan, what's going on here. I mentioned before about sales and stuff like that. We're actually closing a lot of our big retail stores here. We've seen it a couple times now. Just essentially people can buy stuff online, so it's a lot easier for us. It's a similar thing in USA. You can buy pretty much everything on Amazon, and I always find it fascinating that stores like, for example, Best Buy are still in business because, and I guess they're lesser than they were before, but just because you can get everything on Amazon now. For me personally, I go to Best Buy. I look at the products on the shelf, like the TVs or whatever, and then I just go order on Amazon. And I don't think I'm alone on that. And I'd be curious if you guys are the same or different. Just because the prices are like so much different if you order online. So there's very little incentive to purchase in person. So Korea, it's actually interesting just here. I've seen a lot of physical stores closing. Now, it doesn't mean we don't have any retail. I'm just saying, there's less need for it for those kind of things. Now, one thing I will say it's a little bit different from us than say the US is we have a lot of local food markets. I show you guys these things from time to time on the vlog channel. If you want to watch it, you can find it. It's called Chris and Yeji. But yeah, we still go to like local farmers markets, which hopefully will never disappear. I'm always concerned about that because I don't want everything to necessarily be your big box brand groceries. That's just my opinion. I like to have smaller mom and pop things. But with that said, and just give you an idea of life here in Korea. They keep talking about they're gonna revitalize the city here in Busan. I'm gonna show you guys this. These are some designs of like the kind of stuff that they want to do. Now, whether or not we end up completely finishing all of the city to look like this, we'll find out. They're also talking about doing lots of how can I say, like green city kind of initiatives to make it so that the parks and the shopping and the residential all in balance. To be perfectly frank, I think what Busan's doing is really cool. That's why we live here. I think it's great. You can see here, this is an idea where you mix your, commercial, residential, leisure, healthcare, open space, and innovation cluster. You put it all together, try to get this, sustainable cities with parks, sustainable energy, solar, this kind of stuff. You guys get the idea. I'm just showing you this stuff, and I'm just talking about Busan because sometimes people ask about like what life is like here. It's really different. Many of the things that they're doing is like tearing down a lot of older buildings because we have a different history right here in say Korea than you would have in USA. So there's a lot of buildings. I was pretty frank. They're what's our word to say it? We'll just say kind of shacks. I guess is a good way to put it. And it is just pretty frank. It is sad for the people who lose their homes. I'm not lying, right? It's sad, but a lot of these people are actually elderly. And so I think that there comes a point in history or in the timeline, I guess you could call it, to where there's less and less people that are there. Some of these buildings are even empty, and then it takes money to come in and revitalize it. So that's something that the government's doing is figuring out ways to do this. It doesn't always work though. Part of this revitalization stuff, they've and you can see here like they're talking about different streets. You're gonna have like Waterfront Street, Living Street, Main Canal, Coulter Street, Relaxation Street, Green Street, etc. But some of the things they've tried to do, for example, we tried to get the World Expo to come, failed on that. It's hard to get that, and I think I want to say it went to somewhere in the Middle East. I can't remember which one, maybe Abu Dhabi or something like that, beat us out. We're gonna try to get the Summer Olympics is what I've heard next. So, whether or not that's good or bad, I'll let you guys be the judge. Oftentimes cities lose money on the Olympics, but this is something that we do to spur growth, because it is true, actually, we do have growth problems here. But it is fascinating because regards to this kind of thing, I'm just talking about Busan. I know don't know about Busan that much, but just people ask about this. But regards to these kind of things, there are some parts of the city that are like really vibrant. There's a lot of money going into it, and there's other parts of the city that are like, frankly, just a lot less money going into. And so you have this combination of winners and losers, and then you have to decide, like, if you're going to pick up real estate or not. Do you want to be in the hottest area that could be the most overpriced, or do you want to go for the lower area in hopes that you're getting good value? But it's always a risk because, and in my opinion, I don't consider myself a real estate investor. I'm just not into that stuff because it's just too risky, and you lock up your money and you never know exactly how it's going to move. Because there's a lot of stuff here to where, like, people start a project and then it doesn't get finished because maybe the demand's not there, or the price of materials go up too much and it's impossible to finish, is too high. So that's I'm just talking to, like, giving a perspective of here in Busan, how it may or may not be different than what's going on in your neck of the woods. But that's why I sort of like when you talk about markets, and sometimes people talk about like how all these things connect. The cost to borrow money is like really, really important, right? It makes things flow really, really well, but sometimes too well, too hot, and then you start to get too much inflation. And inflation generally hurts the people at the bottom of the economic spectrum the most. And so that's why it's something that Powell always mentions, is he is aware of that stuff. And unfortunately, in my opinion, as we go forward with Trump's policies, I think the people at the bottom are going to get hurt a lot. And then not only that, we're worried about growth rates around the world, right? So that's the balance that the Fed's always talking about when they say incoming data is, what is growth? Are people shopping? Are people hiring? People firing? These kind of things. And then how does that relate to stocks? Then you look at each individual company and what to report every quarter. Are they making money or not? And you get individual details on that. So sorry, I know I talk about multiple topics in every single video, but just always have a lot on my mind, and I like to talk about this stuff with you guys and hear what's going on in your community, and I try to share what's going on in our community. So if you have any thoughts about any one of these things, please share, and I'll catch you all in the next video.